sister-in-law mocked my husband for being a stay-at-home dad, so I exposed how he secretly supported her for years. I, 28F, and my husband Jason, 29M, met 6 years ago and got married about 3 years back. We also have a 1-year-old daughter together. We met because of my brother, who's good friends with Jason, because of their line of work. Jason used to be a cop and my brother runs the pizza place which he used to frequently visit. They struck up a friendship and 1 year, my brother brought Jason back home for Thanksgiving. That's how we met for the first time, and soon after, I asked him out and we started dating. After being together for 3 years, he proposed and we got married. I'd met his family quite a few times before marriage and most of them had always been very warm to me, with the exception of my sister-in-law Janice, 27F. Even my mother-in-law was pretty nice to me, but she wasn't, for whatever reason. Jason kept telling me that she would come around eventually, but she never did. She never showed her dislike for me outright and in front of other people either, and kept things subtle. Backhanded compliments, insults discussed as jokes and stuff, you know, the usual. Initially, it would really get on my nerves, but after a while, I learned to ignore it. Because it didn't make sense to give her the satisfaction of letting her get under my skin. She never said anything in front of Jason, probably because she didn't want to take that risk and turn him against her. But he knew about my equation with his sister, and made sure that I was not left alone with her whenever we visited his family. I didn't want him to cut his family off, or even cut his sister off, because it just wasn't worth it to go to so much trouble, all because of a few mean jokes and insults or whatever. So we just dealt with the situation by not dealing with it and letting her say whatever she wanted to, while I tried my best to just ignore it. That's what Jason did as well. It wasn't ideal, but we didn't have much of a choice, so we just had to suck it up and let her continue with her stupid and weird behavior when it came to me, since we wanted to maintain the peace of the family. Thinking back on it, I'd said something and nipped this in the butt instead of being all self-conscious and being afraid to speak up for myself. I just didn't want to be labeled as that woman who gets mad at every little thing and breaks up families. And that's why I stayed quiet for a long time, but I just couldn't anymore after what happened recently. Jason was a cop, but he quit the force a few months ago because he wanted to be a stay-at-home dad. So I'm a working mother and I don't have an easy job. I'm a trauma surgeon. We have a daughter and we are really struggling with how to make this work-life balance arrangement work. Of course, both of us have high-pressure jobs and couldn't exactly afford to spend much time at home. We did have the daycare and our parents would take care of our daughter whenever we needed them to, but it wasn't good enough for us. We were missing out on spending time with her, and it felt like she was going to grow up without her parents around much if we went on that way. So about a year ago, Jason and I had a serious conversation about this, and he told me that he was going to quit the force to spend more time with our daughter at home. I didn't force him into making that decision, but he decided it for himself because I made more money than him, and he believed that it was only fair that he quit his job, so our daughter would have at least one of us around for most of the day. I asked him if he was sure about that, probably thousands of times, before I was finally convinced that he actually wanted to go through with this and become a full-time dad. It was a huge step to take, and I knew how much my husband enjoyed being a cop, so I wanted to make sure that he wouldn't resent me for this. But I don't think he would, because he seems more than happy to spend his days taking care of the household and our daughter. The last time we spoke about this was just a few weeks back, and he told me that initially, he had found it a little difficult to adjust to being a stay-at-home dad after working for so many years. But with time, it became easier for him because he could spend time with our daughter. He seems quite content with his life and how everything has turned out for him. He doesn't seem to have any complaints, because he says that his dream job used to be being a cop, but now, it's being a father, and that's pretty beautiful. His family, however, doesn't see any beauty in the situation, and I should have seen it coming because his family is pretty traditional. They do allow women to work, and most of the women in his family are working women. But the catch is that they don't allow their men to work at home. None of the men in my husband's family even touch the household chores because they consider it beneath their dignity. So eventually, the women in their families end up doing the household work along with their jobs, where they are forced to quit their jobs, like my mother-in-law. The crazy part is that they don't even see anything wrong with this arrangement and think that it's completely fine. Jason and I have discussed this in person, and both of us agree that it's a ridiculous school of thought. But we never spoke about it with his family, because they would just come out with some stupid arguments to cover up the misogyny, and we didn't want to get into that. If they were happy living their life that way, then who are we to judge them for it? Thankfully, Jason and I always split everything equally, and sometimes he would even do more of the household work than me, in case I ended up working late. And now, of course, he's doing everything at home and holding down the fort there while I bring home the money. To us, it doesn't really matter who does what, as long as we're all happy and healthy and there's food on the table. His parents and sister, however, strongly disagree with this and are very upset with Jason's decision to quit the force and stay at home with our daughter. They think that it makes him less of a man or whatever, and have been arguing with him for months about it. I tried to intervene at first, but his parents made it very clear that my interference would only make their relationship worse. Jason didn't want me to come to his defense, either, because he didn't want to involve me in this mess, so I stayed out of their way. It took them a while, but they did come around to our new arrangement and haven't brought it up for quite a few months. It also probably helped that they had new things to think about, like Janice getting married. Her boyfriend of 2 years, Harry, 27 Mem, proposed to her, and after that, Everybody pretty much forgot about Jason because this was a much bigger deal. We were thankful that they chose to get engaged around that time because it really helped to take the heat off of us. For a few months, nobody from his family brought up Jason's decision to quit the force and tried to fight him on it. We were quite relieved because we thought that this had finally blown over and we wouldn't have to hear about a man's role in his family ever again. But then Janice held her rehearsal dinner yesterday, and that's where this came up again, so I had a bit of an outburst. Janice is getting married in one day, so this is a bit of an emergency and we need to figure out what we want to do about this really quickly. This is time sensitive, so we would appreciate a fast response to this post. So while we were at dinner, Jason and I were sitting opposite Janice and Harry. Their parents and a couple of other family members were also sitting around us, and we were all having a normal, fun chat. Nothing too controversial, and I was relieved that we were finally getting along with his family like before. It was a big deal, especially after how upset everybody had been when Jason quit the force. I didn't think this would happen again. But then, Janice decided to go off topic and started asking me how my work was going. I felt uncomfortable, but I had to answer the question because it was a very normal and innocent question in itself. But I knew where she was about to take it. I told her that my work was great and left it at that, hoping that she would take the hint and not drag this out. But then she asked Jason how his work was going and cracked a joke about how his job finally allows him to take time off without worrying about anything, because now his life is just a long vacation since he is living off of my income. She didn't stop there and went on to say that at least now, it's clear to everybody who wears the pants in our family. She cracked a few more jokes that were pretty below the belt and kept making fun of Jason while he quietly tried to ignore it and smile through it all, trying to take it like a sport. But I couldn't handle it and I just lost control. It was probably years of her getting on my nerves and months of having to deal with Jason's family and their annoying beliefs. Something in me just snapped and I decided to bring up something that nobody wanted to hear. I told her that she could crack as many jokes as she wanted to, but Jason was still a better man and an overall better human being than everybody in their family combined. I told her that she really had some audacity to make fun of Jason, considering the fact that she wouldn't even have been able to go to college. Had it not been for him and never met Harry if Jason didn't choose to give money to his parents to help them out ever since he was 18. Nobody likes talking about it because it was a very dark period in their lives, but Jason's father had lost his job back when Jason was still in high school. Janice was too spoiled and oblivious to even notice the problems in her family and her parents, and Jason decided that they would do their best to make sure that she doesn't find out about it either. So they never said no to anything that she wanted, even while they were struggling, to make sure she didn't end up worrying about their finances. Jason had to take up 2 jobs to be able to support his family back then, while his father continued to search for a job with decent pay. They didn't have to suffer for more than a year, and until then, they had Jason to support them and some savings to sustain them. Janice never found out about it because her family didn't let her know, and she was oblivious to everything that happened back then, until I brought it up at the rehearsal dinner. She was shocked, and so was everybody else, because this was a huge secret, and nobody was supposed to talk about it because they didn't want her to find out. But after almost a decade, I had finally brought this up, and now she knew exactly how much she owed to her brother. So she had no business making fun of him and trying to put him down like she was at the time. Everybody else might be too great to tell her the truth, especially Jason, so she would finally be grateful to him, but I wasn't above it. After I said that, there was just silence all around the table. And after a minute or so, Jason and I excused ourselves and headed out. We walked back to our hotel room in silence, and even after we got there, we didn't discuss what happened at that dinner. I knew that this was going to become a huge deal, and so did he. But not discussing it further was his way of letting me know that he didn't think I did anything wrong. And so there was no need for a discussion. And it did become a huge deal because when I woke up the next morning, it was to the sound of knocking on our door because Jason's parents were out there and wanted to speak to me, first thing in the morning. Jason let them in, and once we were all seated, they got to the point and told me that the family wanted me to apologize to Janice because what I said at the dinner was something that they had kept from her for a really long time, and they didn't think that it was appropriate for me to bring it up since it wasn't my place to say that to her, and it ruined the vibe of the evening because now Janice was miserable and couldn't stop crying, and it was all my fault. They also said that Janice was just joking and messing around with Jason like siblings usually do, so I had no reason to get so defensive and blurt out such a huge secret, knowing what it would mean for their family. Now, Janice felt extremely guilty and kept saying that she had been a burden on the family for so long and wasn't even aware of it. They told me that she was and kept apologizing to her parents. She was having a total meltdown, and this is exactly why they didn't want her to ever get to know the truth about what had happened all those years ago. They believed that she was an emotionally fragile girl and wouldn't be able to handle the truth, and I suppose there's some truth to it if she's acting that way. And now they want me to apologize to her and also the rest of the family for my outburst. They also want me to tell her that I didn't mean any of the things that I said to her at dinner and fix this. I have the rest of the day to make up my mind, but they want me to do whatever it is that I have to do before she gets married tomorrow. There is a 1-day gap between the rehearsal dinner and her wedding, because some of her friends are going to arrive today, and she planned for it ahead. So I kind of lucked out on that front because now I have until the evening to decide what I want to do. Jason thinks that I shouldn't apologize because I was only standing up for him, and she's always been really rude to me, so it's about time that I retaliated and I have nothing to regret. I personally have also been thinking along the same lines, but she's supposed to get married tomorrow and I really wouldn't feel good about myself, knowing that I caused somebody to have a mental breakdown right before their wedding day. And most other people from her family believe that I owe her an apology, but that's obviously coming from a biased place. And as much as I hate to admit it, Jason's opinion is also coming from the same place. The only difference is that he's speaking in my favor. So for a truly neutral opinion, I've come to Reddit. Ida for bringing up how my husband helped out his family in the past because my sister-in-law kept making fun of him for being a stay-at-home father now. Update 1, so it's evening time now, and after reading the comments, I have come to the conclusion that I have nothing to apologize for. Jason and I are currently packing our stuff so we can leave because it's going to be really weird if I don't apologize and then I attend her wedding tomorrow. We are going to tell his parents that we're leaving because it'll be really rude if we don't, and just pull a disappearing act without bothering to tell anyone. Jason and I talked about this a couple of hours ago, and he says that it's the right thing to do because Janice has always been really insensitive and rude for no reason, and it's about time that she faced some consequences for it. He also told me that it had been getting increasingly difficult for him to put up with his family because of the way they'd been behaving ever since he quit his job. He had expected them to be supportive, but they were far from it, and were actively pulling him down and making him feel horrible for wanting to spend time with his daughter. We had always known that his family had a crazy misogynistic attitude towards work and household chores, and we really should have seen this coming. But we wanted to give them a chance to change and unlearn everything. They had that chance and they decided to stick to their old beliefs instead of getting with the times. So now if we want to stop talking to them, it's their own fault for not being supportive of us. We're happy with our lives, and if they can't be happy for us, then we don't want to keep in touch with them, because we don't need that sort of negative energy around us. And that's how they've been acting for the past few months, constantly negative and critical of us and our life choices. So now we're finally ready to bid adieu to these people. Honestly, Jason and I had only been sticking around out of a sense of obligation, but we can't tolerate this behavior anymore. I have put up with enough disrespect disguised as jokes and concern, and so has Jason, but I think it's very necessary for us to draw a line and let people know that this line is not to be crossed anymore because we are not going to take it. We teach people how we want to be treated, and we have been setting a really bad example for ourselves, but that ends now. So now everybody is going to learn how we want to be treated. And if they can't bring themselves to respect us and our choices, then they can stay the heck out of our lives. Update 2, okay, so Jason and I are at home now. It didn't go well with his parents when we told them that we were not going to apologize, and we're actually heading back home since we didn't feel comfortable attending the wedding ceremony after what happened. They had obviously been expecting us to suck it up and apologize because they completely freaked out when Jason told them that we were leaving and we're not going to attend the ceremony. They started yelling at us and telling us that we couldn't leave because that would raise a lot of questions, and they didn't want us to ruin Janice's wedding. Jason's mom told us that we had to be present at the ceremony and that whatever issues we had would just have to be sorted out later. Jason told her that we just weren't comfortable being present at the ceremony because it had become very evident to us that Janice didn't respect us, and neither did anybody else since they expected us to apologize for merely standing up for ourselves. They'd all been treating us badly ever since Jason quit his job, and we weren't okay with this behavior anymore. So this was us putting our food down because we'd had enough. After we said that, Jason's parents told us that we were being very egoistic and selfish and said that we needed to think about the repercussions of our actions. They said that us not being present at the ceremony after we had been there for all the other events would seem very strange. And then the entire day would just become about our fight and would take away the focus from Janice and her. We argued for a bit more, and then Janice herself showed up at the room. She had the room right next to her parents. She had overheard yelling and decided to come to check it out. Once she was there, her parents filled her in and she told us that she was fine with us not coming to the wedding and would actually prefer it that way. She addressed me directly and told me that she didn't have a problem with Jason attending the wedding, but he wouldn't come without me, and I was the last person she wanted there. She called me selfish and vindictive and said that the only reason I ruined her rehearsal dinner was because I wanted to create trouble at her wedding. So then the two of us got into a petty cat fight, which I regret, because we really could have done without it. But that gave us an excuse to leave without more of a fuss. They didn't try to stop us as we left, and that was a relief because we didn't have it in us to put up an even bigger fight. So she can go ahead with her wedding, and Jason and I wish that it goes well. But we don't want anything to do with her or his parents anymore. We might consider mending our relationship if they apologize, but I don't believe that's going to happen anytime soon. For now, both of us are just relieved to be home. Our daughter had been living with my parents, but we picked her up on our way back home, and Jason is currently playing with her as I type out this update. This is my favorite space, and I don't care what anybody else says about it. Our family is just perfect the way it is. Update 3. Hey guys, so this update is coming a day after the wedding. We were not there, but we heard that there was a lot of talk about us on the day of the wedding, most of which came from Janice herself. It's ironic that her parents were worried that our absence would lead to a lot of questions from other people and the day would end up becoming more about us and our fight with Janice than about her. But I guess Janice leaned into the idea and started making her wedding day more about us herself. There were a few distant relatives who hadn't been present at the rehearsal dinner to witness my outburst, but they heard all about it from Janice after the ceremony. Apparently, she didn't stop talking about our fight the entire day and was really milking the drama. Good for her, I guess. I can't say I expected any better from her. The only downside of what she did is that now, anybody who isn't too close to the family is reaching out to Jason to ask about the drama. Everybody wants to feel involved and get to the bottom of this. We haven't been entertaining it so far, and I don't think that we will because we don't want anything to do with his family, unless they apologize. And since it doesn't appear to us that they have any intention of apologizing, we're just going to stay out of the drama and let them do their thing. We have tried to be as vague as possible while responding to everybody who is texting Jason because we want to take the high road and not engage. That's only going to lead to more fighting and drama since Janice pretty much lives for it. His family will definitely have a field day if they find out that we have been talking about them behind their backs, even though they were doing the same thing to us. We just don't want to get into it, so we are going to do what we did all these years and ignore everybody. Next story. My sister-in-law announced her pregnancy at our anniversary party, knowing we've been struggling to conceive. It broke me. I, 27 FEF, have been struggling with conceiving for a while now. My husband and I have been trying for almost 8 months, but with no luck, and have decided that we're going to get fertility tests in a few weeks. We haven't done that so far out of nerves, but it's about time we take the test. He and I have been together for 6 years, married for 3. I really want to be a mother, and everyone who knows me knows that all I've really wanted is to have a family of my own. My husband is also equally into the idea, and this just felt like the right time to start trying, but it's just not happening for us right now, and it's getting kind of frustrating since we've been doing everything we can to get pregnant, from medicines to home remedies. Both of us have been on edge for the last couple of months, so we celebrated our wedding anniversary by throwing a big party a couple of days back. We went all out with the party so we could take our minds off of things, but it totally backfired, and it's all thanks to my dearest sister-in-law, Jenny, 25F. About Jenny, she got married a few months ago to her longtime boyfriend, and it was a pretty grand affair. She's a bit of a show-off and kind of holier than thou, but I've never had a problem with her or anyone from my husband's family. This is probably the first time that we're all at odds, and I don't know, it feels wrong and weird. Jenny and I have never been great friends, but we have always been on good terms. However, the incident at my anniversary party messed everything up, and now I don't think I can look at her, or my in-laws, the same way. For context, my husband's family didn't know that he and I were trying for a baby. We did want to tell them, but after we were unsuccessful for the first couple of months, we decided that we wouldn't tell them anything until we had good news to share with them. My parents didn't know about it either, to be fair, so I thought that it was okay. A couple of my friends knew, but they were all busy with their lives, so it wasn't as if I could go to them for advice or bother them by talking about my troubles with conceiving. Then, a few days ago, about 4 or 5 days back I suppose, Jenny was visiting us with her husband. Our husbands went out into the garden outside at one point because I'd mentioned that the sprinklers need to be fixed, and Jenny's husband very graciously offered to take a look at it since he was quite handy. So they left me and Jenny in the room. I tried to make small talk with her, but she just straight up asked me what I was so upset about because she said that she could tell that I was feeling down about something and she wanted me to share it with her. I hesitated and tried to pass it off as nothing, but I guess I had been really upset that day after yet another negative pregnancy test, and I hadn't been able to hide it well. So she insisted that I tell her what was going on with me, and I decided to tell her the truth after she told me that she wanted to help. My husband and I had decided that we were not going to share this with people until we were actually pregnant. But I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. I was already feeling very upset and emotional because I was struggling with conceiving, and it was even more difficult for me to not talk about it to anybody. I couldn't talk about it to my husband because he was going through the same thing, and bringing it up with him repeatedly would just make us both feel bad. So when Jenny asked me, I just told her the truth, that my husband and I were trying to have a baby without thinking of the consequences. I was just desperate to get it off my chest and talk to somebody about this. At the time, she seemed genuinely happy for me and even hugged me and told me that she was so excited to have a baby niece or nephew. But then I told her that we had been struggling for quite some time now, and it was just getting to the both of us, which is why I looked really upset that day. She seemed sympathetic and even offered to take me to a fertility specialist who could help me out, and I thanked her for the concern. But I didn't need that. I just needed somebody to talk to, and I was glad that she was being so helpful and sensitive. Our husbands were in the garden for about half an hour, and as long as they were outside, Jenny and I had a real conversation. It was actually really nice to talk to her because it felt like she really understood what I was saying and was trying her best to be empathetic towards me. By the time my husband came back and we had to drop the topic, I felt considerably better. When they were leaving, Jenny gave me a hug, which she usually doesn't do, and it just felt nice to have a friend to talk to. We didn't talk for the next couple of days until she came over on the day of our anniversary party. That was 2 days ago, and even when she arrived, she was very nice to me. She hugged me once again and gave me our gift. I thought that we were finally becoming friends, but that didn't last for very long. My husband and I had invited a lot of people to the party. All his family and friends, as well as mine, were present, and it was actually helping us take our minds off of babies and pregnancy. We were chatting with people, laughing and making jokes, and having a generally fun time. Around an hour into the party, Jenny and her husband walked to the middle of the room and said that they had an announcement to make. My husband looked confused and I froze because I thought she was going to say something about me and what I had told her just a few days ago. But it was much worse because once everybody was quiet and listening to them, her husband went on to announce that about a week ago, they had found out that they were pregnant. And in just 9 months, they would become parents. Everyone who was present there started clapping and cheering for them, and my husband's family went up to her to congratulate her while the two of us just stood in a corner quietly. Before I knew what I was doing, the tears started flowing down my face, and I had to make a run for it towards the restroom. My husband had seen me crying, and he followed me, but I didn't let him in because I wanted a couple of minutes to myself so I could calm down and not make a scene in front of all our guests. I was trying to process this information and make sense of what was happening while my husband stood outside the door and kept telling me that it was going to be fine and that it would certainly happen for us at some point as well. It was just taking some time. And even if it didn't, we would be fine and we'd look into other options, but we'd get through it together. His saying that made me feel better, and so I let him in. I told him that Jenny knew that I had been struggling, but he didn't react to it and told me that we could talk about that later. At the time, the only thing that he was worried about was if I was all right or not, and everything else could wait. So we just stood there hugging each other quietly for a few minutes, and that was all I needed to recover from my shock. By the time we came back out, people were done congratulating her and the attention was back on us. And apparently, everybody had been looking for us. So when we reappeared into the living room, all eyes were on us, which wasn't ideal because I had been crying and it showed. I had tried my best to make my face look normal, but my mascara had been running like crazy while I was crying and I hadn't been able to get rid of all of it before I came back out. So as soon as people saw me, they started asking me if I was all right and were all very concerned about me. I know I wasn't fooling anyone, but I told everybody that I just felt kinda overwhelmed, which is why I had to take a break, but I was all right. It was a feeble excuse, but I had to say something to get them off my back. Once my husband and I were back, we even went up to Jenny and her husband and congratulated them. She looked upset, but didn't say anything, and we continued with the party. It was difficult, but I think my husband and I tried our best to handle the situation with dignity and grace. And I would say that we dealt with things pretty well. Even though I had been overcome with emotion in the middle of the party after Jenny's announcement, I didn't let it ruin the evening or get in the way of an otherwise successful evening. My husband and I discussed everything only after the guests had all left and we were in bed all by ourselves. I told him that I had confided in Jenny about us trying to get pregnant when she had visited the other day, so I thought it was a bit insensitive of her to make this announcement at our anniversary party, knowing that we were suffering and trying to distract ourselves from it. He told me that he agreed with me, and even if I hadn't told her about our struggles with trying to get pregnant before the day of the party, she still shouldn't have made that announcement on the day of our wedding anniversary, because this was a day supposed to be about us. And it was just tacky to make it about herself without even asking us for permission first, and that was a valid point as well. While discussing this, we also realized that when she was consoling me the other day, she already knew she was pregnant at the time, because they had found out about it a week before the day of the party. And we realized that it was a deliberate move on her part to make the announcement at our anniversary party. But we couldn't figure out why she would want to do such a thing and hurt me, because as far as I was concerned, we were never the best of friends, but we were never on bad terms either. My husband and I decided that we had to talk to Jenny about this and confront her about it. We knew that after we discussed things with her, there were only two ways this could go. She could either apologize to us and we could clear the air and move on, or we would have to cut her off. So yesterday, my husband and I decided to make a call to Jenny and talk to her about what had happened at the party. We decided that we were going to do it once we came back home from work, but instead, we received a phone call from his parents, telling us to come over to their place ASAP for a family meeting. They said it was urgent, so we decided that we would take a day off of work and check out what this was all about. So we went to his parents' place and everybody was there already, my husband's parents, his grandma, as well as Jenny and her husband. Everybody looked very serious, and it felt like I'd walked into a courtroom, but the jury had already decided that we were guilty, so we didn't even stand a chance. Jenny was avoiding even looking at us, and I thought that it was strange, but it all started making sense once my husband's parents started talking. They told me that on the day of the party, they had noticed that my husband and I were the only people who left the room after Jenny announced that she was pregnant, and didn't even return to the room for a considerable amount of time. They said that even when I did congratulate them, it didn't seem genuine or sincere. I could tell that they were accusing me of something, and I didn't really appreciate it, but I still told them the reason why I'd acted that way is I didn't want to be rude to them. My husband and I told him that we had been trying to get pregnant for a long time, but it wasn't happening for us, and we were frustrated. So when Jenny made her announcement, it was pretty much the last straw for us because this anniversary party was supposed to help us be distracted and not think about pregnancy for a little while. But that didn't work because Jenny announced that she was pregnant and everything that we were trying to forget just came rushing back to us. So we got overwhelmed and I had to leave the room because I started crying and I didn't want to let anyone see me break down, and so I left. I thought that was enough of an explanation, and it was a pretty valid reason for me to behave the way that I did, so they couldn't possibly argue with it. There was silence for a while, and my husband. I actually thought that they were going to ask us more about our decision to have a baby, or at least say something positive about it. But they didn't even react to that news and continued to talk about our reaction to Jenny's announcement. After the brief pause, his mother told me that she could understand that I was upset, but I was also an adult. And I had to learn how to regulate and control my emotions and not let them get the better of me, because apparently the way I behaved at the party was just unacceptable. I honestly didn't think that there was anything wrong with the way I acted, and I think we covered it up pretty well after we came back to the living room. We congratulated Jenny and her husband, and we got it over with gracefully. I thought that was enough to compensate. My husband and I argued with them and told them there was nothing wrong with the way we had behaved, and anybody else in our place would have probably had a worse reaction. Maybe even kicked Jenny and her husband out of the party for making the day all about themselves. I also told them that Jenny had known about our struggles before the party, and in spite of that, she chose to make that announcement, knowing that we were going through something. So if anybody needs to be held accountable, it should be her, and not us, because she was the one who did something and made that announcement at a place that she wasn't supposed to. And then things got kind of chaotic as Jenny also became part of the argument and started playing the victim, saying that she was hoping that her news would make us feel better and we would know that it would happen for us at some point as well. It was a ridiculous reason, but she was sticking to it, and her parents were talking her up by saying that she was just trying to be nice to us. So we had to suck it up and apologize for what we did. There was a lot of fighting and shouting, and at one point, his mother screamed at me and said that I had stolen Jenny's thunder on purpose because I was jealous of her, and that's why I had thrown a temple tantrum and started crying, so I could get some attention and sympathy from everybody present at the party. I was very upset when she said that, and so was my husband, so he told them that if that's what they thought about me, then we were probably better off cutting all ties with them. We left the house and came back home, still discussing whatever they had said to us and the audacity that it took to play the victim, knowing that you had done something wrong, and it screwed up a happy day for somebody on purpose for no real reason. We didn't expect to hear from them for at least a couple more days, but then Jenny sent my husband a message saying that she was hurt and disappointed by the way that we were acting, because she only wanted to make us feel better with her own announcement and had no intention of making us feel bad. She also said that she didn't think I would take it so hard and start crying just because she was pregnant. She had believed that it was a reason to be happy for everyone, not just her. And she wanted to share that happiness with us, but I had spoiled it by misinterpreting her intentions. She said that she felt insulted and also kind of agreed with her mother, that I had stolen her thunder because anniversaries come every year, but she can only announce her first pregnancy once. So I should have been happy for her and tried to understand the reason behind what she did, instead of being so self-involved that I couldn't think past myself and my struggles. I really don't know what to make of that, so I wish to ask Ida for crying and leaving the room when my sister-in-law announced her pregnancy. Update 1. Hey, I just want to thank everybody who commented on our post and reached out to us to support us. I know pregnancy isn't easy, and struggling to get pregnant at all is not something that I'm going through on my own. It feels nice to know the stories of other women who went through the exact same thing that I'm going through right now. I just want to say that motherhood is beautiful and I will love my baby, even if I don't get pregnant myself and end up opting for surrogacy or maybe adoption. It's all just the same to us. The point is that our child will always be loved and cared for. We are going to get tested tomorrow, and after that, we'll finally know what we have to do, so wish us luck. And now, coming to the situation with my husband's family. There has been no improvement yet, but thanks to all the comments here, my husband and I at least know that we were not the ones at fault here, so we have nothing to apologize for. And if they want to stay in touch with us, then Jenny is the one who is going to have to apologize. Personally, I would want all of them to apologize to us, because the way they were just flinging accusations at us when we went to their house was really horrible. They had no right to speak to us that way, especially when we were the victims of this mess. Even now, thinking about it makes me want to call them up and give them a piece of my mind, because they had said a lot of terrible things. I haven't heard from any of them yet, but it's just been 2 days, so I guess they are going to wait for us to reach out to them before they do anything. I wasn't surprised that Jenny did what she did, but to be honest, I didn't expect her parents to be just as entitled and delusional as her. And my husband said that it came as a shock to him as well, because they had never behaved like this in the past. My husband and Jenny had always been treated equally by them, so this switch up in their behavior, where they were favoring Jenny over him, made no sense. I honestly believe that my husband coming after me instead of congratulating his sister is what pissed them off, but that's just a theory. Anyway, a lot of you had also been asking about my parents' opinion on what happened, and if I'm being honest, they didn't have a lot to say. My parents and I are not particularly close, unlike my husband and his family. They did say that what Jenny did was messed up and extended their sympathies, said to thee, but there's not much to talk about regarding the reaction to this. I had told them everything a day after the party, because they had called me to ask why I'd been crying after Jenny's announcement. Then they consoled me for a bit, and told me that they were here for me, but all of us knew that that was just something that they were saying for the sake of it. They were actually too busy with work to be there for me, and that's how it had always been, ever since I was a kid. I don't hold it against them, but there are consequences for everything, and as a result of them never really being around when I was younger, I'm not that close to them now as an adult. This is also part of the reason why I want to be a mother so badly. I've always wanted a family of my own because I knew I'd do it right. I'm not upset about my parents anymore. I used to feel bad about it, but now I'm used to it. I do have a lot of love for them, and so do they, but we don't act like a family when it really comes down to it, and I am honestly okay with that. Update 2. So Jenny reached out to my husband today. He was at work when she called him, so he wasn't able to answer, but she left him a text saying that she wanted to talk to him and it was an emergency. She told him that she would be waiting near his workplace and they could go grab some coffee after he got off. My husband was clever enough to forward that text to me. So around the time that he got off work, I drove to his workplace. And when my husband called me, I met him and we went to the coffee shop that Jenny was waiting at together. Even though she had specifically told him that she only wanted to talk to him and not me. She didn't seem too happy to see me but didn't say anything about it. Then we took our seats and ordered coffee, but after that, we silently waited for her to say something. Because my husband and I had already decided that we were not going to start the conversation. She was the one who had called us there, so she was the one who would have to start talking. We were all silent for about 5 minutes, and it was awkward. But then she gave up, and in an exasperated voice, she said that she was sorry about what happened. She didn't sound like she meant her apology in the slightest, but she didn't stop and wait for us to react to it, or even accept her apology. She told us that the other day when we had that fight with her and her parents at their house, her husband had caught on to the truth and realized that she didn't have my permission to make the announcement at our anniversary party. Earlier, he had believed that Jenny had already asked me if I was all right with them announcing their pregnancy at our party because that's what she had told him. But after that fight, he realized that Jenny had been lying and he didn't feel comfortable with it. Apparently, he was the only person in that room who actually had a spine and a conscience and could see the situation for what it was. An entire family gaslighting the victims into thinking that they were the bad guys here somehow. So naturally, he wasn't comfortable with it, and once they got back home, he had a discussion with Jenny and confronted her to ask her if she had lied to him. He already knew the truth now, so Jenny had told him that she hadn't actually asked me if I would be okay with her making the announcement at our party. But she had assumed that it wouldn't be an issue because it was supposed to make everyone happy, and she didn't anticipate that it was going to make me cry. However, her husband is not an idiot. And he called her bluff immediately because he had learnt during the fight that Jenny had known that I was struggling to conceive before she made the announcement. So there was no way she believed that making the announcement at our party was going to make me happy somehow. And they ended up getting into a fight after that, where her husband accused her of making that announcement at our party on purpose just so she could add insult to injury. He said that she knew that this was going to break my heart, and that's why she did it. She had lied to him about having my consent so she could make that announcement at our party and make matters worse for me. She had done everything intentionally and on purpose. Listening to her narrate whatever her husband had said to her was super satisfying, because my husband and I felt like somebody had finally been able to see through all her BS, but that's not why she was there to meet us. Apparently, her husband had said that he was not going to talk to her or forgive her until we forgave her, and had left that day itself. He hasn't returned since then, even though she has been trying to contact him nonstop. He wasn't returning any calls and had made it very clear to her that he was not going to entertain her until we forgave her. So now, as a last resort, she had come to us and was pleading with us to forgive her and tell her husband about it. My husband and I are not particularly proud of what we did next, but it was much needed. We laughed in her face and told her that she had earned this. And now she was on her own because she had intentionally hit us where it hurt the most after pretending to be a friend to me. We weren't going to forgive her and accept an apology that she didn't even mean. My husband told her that she could tell her husband that he was making the right choice by staying away from her because a person as cruel and heartless as her really wasn't fit to be a mother. She tried to manipulate us by crying, but that wasn't going to work because she and her family hadn't cared when I was crying. And now I didn't have to care either because I knew where I stood with them. And it was about time that they learned their place in our lives as well. We went back home and didn't look back. We don't have any idea as to what is going to happen to them next, but I really hope that her husband files for divorce and gets full custody of the child. Trust me when I say this, that's what is best for the kid.